And I've been like Andrew, too. When we came to France and we began to study up on the situation in Europe, recognizing that though the gospel came to France very early on, some think that the Apostle Paul visited southern France. In the book of Romans, he talks about going to Spain. We know at one point he was in prison. Perhaps he was released again before he was imprisoned a second time and then beheaded under Nero, is what many think. And perhaps he visited southern France. But we know that the gospel came to southern France, the region of the Gauls, very early on. And there were early converts there. There were even early martyrs to the faith in southern France. But the biblical message was constantly diluted by the popular belief. This is a Roman bridge that's still standing there in southern France. And in the 16th century, the French people, actually some of them began to respond eagerly to the Word of God. But the opposition of the state church. This is the chapel in the Versailles Palace where the king has his own church, and the church and the monarchy were always so embedded together. And then on one single day in 1572, called the St. Bartholomew Day Massacre, over 10,000 true believers were killed in France on that day. And after that, many fled the country. And it's why a Frenchman like John Calvin taught in Geneva, rather in Switzerland, rather than in France. He fled for his life, and they were able to then establish a church and establish Protestantism in Switzerland. And according to an article in the USA Today that was written right about the time we went to Western Europe, the article was "Religion Takes a Back Seat in Western Europe." And it documented that France has the highest percentage of population in Europe of people who have never attended church. Over 60% of the population have never even been in a church. Of the 36,700 towns or villages or communes in France, 35,000 have no evangelical church. There are 450 cities with a population of more than 10,000 that have not even one evangelical church as a witness to the gospel. Now, I have to admit that as I looked at that situation and then I looked at my meager resources, my gifts, I wondered, kind of like Andrew, well, what can I really do? How can I change the decline of Christian faith in France and throughout Europe? What can Carol and I do to make a difference? The Christian and Missionary Alliance has been working in France really only for the last 30 years. They sent missionaries to France to learn French to go to Africa and never thought of France as a needy place. And it was only as people were there and began to see the situation and began to see the need that they began to say there's a need for missions and for church planting and for ministry right here. I wondered what we could do. Our resources seem so small and so insignificant. But thank God there are those who don't let what they can't do keep them from doing something. We have the privilege of being involved in this English-speaking congregation in the heart of Paris. And we know we can't reach everybody. Paris has 2.2 million people, and we're a church of about 150 right in the heart of Paris. But some are eager to work on their English skills. Others come to try out an English-speaking church. Still others are internationals who are more comfortable in English than French. We were able to start a Chinese Bible study. And through that, we've seen 8 to 10 young Chinese people give their life to Christ. Most of them have left Paris now and are back in China. And we've had to deal with that. Okay, people that we're investing in, now they're not here any longer, but that they're going out all over the world. Is there a big crowd to feed? Are there millions of people who need Jesus? Yes. Is the church losing ground in some places like Western Europe? It is. But we know that God is still building his church, and he's still calling men and women and boys and girls to himself. And Jesus turns to us and wants to include us in the solution. But there are many Christians today like Andrew who don't understand. They look at their own limited resources, and then they look at the world with its vast need, and they say, 5 loaves and 2 fish? What is that for so many? There are about 65 million people in France, only about 4,000 Protestant churches. About 1/2% are believers in Jesus Christ in that country. Have Carol and I made a difference? We're no Billy Graham, that's for sure. I can tell you that. But I know that God has us there and wants us to offer the 5 loaves and 2 fish of our commitment, our resources, our gifts to him.